We're live? All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Kerry Woolard. I'm the general manager at Trump Winery, and I am joined with our winemaker, Jonathan Wheeler. We'll give you guys just a few minutes to get everything logged on and get everything going. Hopefully you have all of your wines chilled and ready. We sent tasting mats out. We've got 16 states and Washington, D.C. all represented and joining us for this tasting tonight, and hopefully some others from across the country. So we've got East Coast, West Coast, Midwest. We've got people from all over, so we're super excited. Just add comments. If we don't get to your question right away or as we're going along, we will answer it tonight or definitely by tomorrow morning. There's a little bit of a delay, so depending on how the questions come in, we'll do our best to answer them as we get them. And then a special shout out to some of our wine club members who are joining us too. We've got Lori, Michael, Kelly and Robert, Joanne. So we've got Rosalie and Larry are joining us too. So thanks everybody for logging on and joining us. We're gonna start off with something super special, and then I'll let Jonathan take it away to go through this, and I'm gonna get out of the way as well.
All right, so what I've got to start with, are going to actually savor a bottle of sparkling wine. I'm going to show you how to do that today with one of these. This is a wine saver. But first, we're going to put on some safety glasses because safety is first. We have a cold bottle of sparkling wine here. This is our Blanc De Blanc, so it's 100% Chardonnay, Method Champenois. The first thing you're going to want to do on savoring a bottle is you're going to want to remove the foil. So once the foil is removed, you're going to carefully remove the wire hood on the top. And you always want to make sure when you open one of these savoring that the bottle is very, very cold and that you point the bottle in a safe direction, because when you open this off, the cork can go flying. So the trick to this is you're going to take the bottle and you're going to spin the bottle until you find the seam. So the seam is going to be the weakest point of the bottle. You're going to take the saber and you're going to slide up the bottle, and then you're going to push the cork off the bottle in one motion, just like that.
All right, and so with that, we're gonna go right into tasting our Blanc De Blanc.
Here we go.
All right, so Jonathan, why don't you tell me, so you are pouring into what I would call like a classic or traditional flute shape. I prefer drinking out of white wine, so a white wine glass for sparkling. So I'm going to stick with our traditional white wine glass that we have here, our tasting glass that we have in the tasting room. And so, you know, there's kind of this debate going on right now about which is the appropriate glass to use for sparkling. So what are your thoughts? What do you think?
Well, I think first, I think it's up to your personal preference, and I prefer a champagne flute because I've worked very, very hard to make sure I get all of these precious little bubbles inside this glass, and I like to enjoy the bubbles for a longer time. And then the other debate would be in a more of a round bowl, you'll release more aromas and get more flavor profile of the wine. So for a tasting, you could argue that a rounder glass would be better. For enjoying, like me, I like to enjoy my sparkling wine, I like to use the champagne flute. Okay.
So, but I mean, right, wouldn't you say that I can get my nose in this glass quite a bit further, right? So if I'm trying to really, like you say, really taste, enjoy the flavor profile, I can kind of get in there a little bit better and taste that better, right?
Yes.
So you would agree with that?
I would agree with that.
So, but what about, I mean, is there an argument to be made? Like I also really like to drink my sparkling wines or champagne. I'm only going to pour like a couple ounces at a time and kind of sip and enjoy the whole way. Yeah. Do you think that's maybe why I prefer the white? Or
that's totally acceptable. Yeah,
like I'm not giving it enough time to lose the bubbles. I don't think
you don't. Yeah, if you're drinking it like that, then I think that's perfectly fine. What I like in a champagne flute is one that really kind of bowls up. It has usually a widest part at about 2 or 3 ounces, and then really curves up, and that's kind of the perfect blend between really keeping in all of the carbonation that I've worked hard at and getting a lot of the flavor from the nose, getting your nose in there and really enjoying.
Okay, so why don't you tell us about the carbonation in this particular wine, because all of our sparklings are brut. They're all Method Champenois. So why don't you tell us what that means and why it is so hard for you to get that carbonation in there? We're not injecting CO2, right? This is a super long, difficult, gentle process. So tell us about it, and then let's taste.
Yeah, this is a method champenois, meaning that it is naturally fermented inside the bottle using yeast to eat sugar inside of the bottle and create carbonation naturally. The alternative would be forced carbonating with a tank of CO2 like a soda pop, but it creates a very poppy, crisp bubble, and it doesn't create a lot of flavor profile in the wine. This is actually 100% Chardonnay, Blanc De Blanc. It's pressed, fermented inside the tank, and then about 9 to 12 months later, we do a secondary fermentation in the bottle. I add some yeast and some sugar inside the bottle, and the fermentation happens, and after the fermentation is finished, I age them horizontally in the bottle for usually 3 to 4 years in our Blanc De Blanc. And the aging process for the 3 to 4 years allows the yeast to break down and create these really nice creamy textures and a lot of body and richness in the sparkling wine. And then when I finish it, I remove the yeast. I use the natural carbonation inside the bottle to eject all of the yeast inside the bottle, and then I'm adding what's called a dosage, which is a mixture of white wine and sugar that is a blend that I add into the wine to soften the acidity and just make a rounder profile and something that's just really nice and enjoyable.
Lovely. And so the flavors that I'm tasting, and I think a lot of it from that, yeast development, 36 months on lees, right? So I get, of course, that yeasty sort of bready characteristic. I see that in a brioche kind of flavor, but I'm still getting really great acid here, like bright green apple. What flavors should they be expecting to taste at home?
Yeah, I mean, you really should get a lot of good citrus. You might find a little bit of pear or apple. Green apple is definitely one of the major profiles of Chardonnay in a Blanc De Blanc style. And it's just a really nice, well-balanced wine. I work really hard in the vineyard here to make sure that we have the perfect grapes for the sparkling wines. So we're picking them in a more fresher manner that creates a nice base acidity to the wine that really allows the wine to age longer and give you a nice profile.
And it's got this great creaminess to it and almost like a lemon curd characteristic or a lemon meringue kind of flavor. Super enjoyable.
Yeah.
So some of the questions I see coming through are, you guys want to come and visit the winery, and are we kid friendly? We absolutely are. The tasting room is open every day, Wednesday through Monday from 10 to 4. We've got a beautiful big lawn out back that overlooks our vineyard and our view. So, kids are definitely welcome. Also, some questions I saw about where to find the wines in Ohio. Right now, we are shipping to 31 states and Washington, D.C. Ohio is one of those states. So the best way to get our wines is just to order them directly online. All right. Shall we move on to the next wine?
Sounds great.
All right. Okay, so I know that when we sent out the tasting mats for you guys, and right, this is kind of a luxurious way to do a tasting, is to set out 4 glasses and kind of use just one at a time for your wine. Jonathan's going to do that, and really, truly kind of the best way to do a tasting and have a fresh glass, and no other flavors are impeding at all. Sometimes that's not practical, and I totally get it. I don't have, if I'm having friends over or something like that, I certainly don't have 50 glasses that I can rotate through. So the trick that I like to use at home, and what I'm going to do here, is rather than rinsing with water, which is going to dilute whatever you're tasting next, rinse with your next wine. So next we have Sauvignon Blanc. I'm going to dump our sparkling that we have here. And just a quick little, not even an ounce, just a quick little rinse of the Sauvignon Blanc. I'm going to swish it around in the glass, pour that out, and now my glass is totally clean, ready to go, already has the flavors of Sauvignon Blanc in there, so I'm not really going to have impeding flavors or any interference from the wine before.
So what we have here is our 2017 Sauvignon Blanc. We've got a small planting here of Sauvignon Blanc. It's about 4 acres, so it's a very low production for us.
Well, it's more now.
More now. We've just planted about 7.5 more acres. We should see fruit from that. We planted it last year, so we should see our first fruit in a year from now. This is one of my favorite grapes in the region that I really like. This is actually a blend. It's got Sauvignon Blanc with a little bit of Semillon in it. So it is really a more traditional French-style white Bordeaux. but made in our own unique style. I did spend some time in New Zealand, and I worked for a few wineries there at a custom crush place, and it was I got the opportunity to work with a lot of different winemakers of the different styles of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So I took some of their techniques and I blended it with our terroir here in Virginia and made this kind of unique Sauvignon Blanc.
All right, so let's taste it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the difference, right, between, so you reference kind of Bordeaux style Sauvignon Blanc, and certainly blending a little Semillon into that is part of that.
Yep.
But from a flavor profile perspective, what are the differences in, you know, obviously with your time in New Zealand?
Right.
I would argue ours are kind of pushing to that sort of Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand style with the flavor profile, but why don't you tell us the difference and what we're tasting here? Yeah,
so traditionally in white Bordeaux, you are blending Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon, and they can kind of run the gamut of very, very round and developed wines aged in French oak barrels. But in general, if you're talking just in the climates between Bordeaux and Southern Hemisphere, you're talking about more tropical aromas, more developed aromas of more floral characteristics, and the Southern Hemisphere wines are really more on the acidity, more on the citrus notes, some lemon,
grapefruit.
Some grapefruit
in here for sure.
Yeah, for sure, grapefruit.
But then I'm getting a little bit of papaya, like some of those kind of tropical characteristics that you're talking about too.
So that's where I'm blending the two styles. Where and I'm not doing any French oak aging on this. I'm actually doing 100% stainless steel. I find that really brings the full flavor of the grape without masking the variety. So I think it's nice. It has a nice little herbaceous greenness to it that I really like, and that really comes from what I like to do is a skin contact in the before I press the grapes. I like to crush the grapes. We hand pick them and we crush them into a tank, and then I like to let them macerate for a little bit, and it really extracts some of the green characteristics from the skin, and then it kind of balances out with, like you said, the tropical, the mango, and with the nice acidity with the grapefruit.
All right, so when you're tasting at home too, a couple of things, right? I'm sure you'll notice we're swirling our glasses quite a bit up here. What we're really trying to do is just get the flavors from the bottom in the glass to come up to the top of the glass, bring some of those aromas up so we can put our nose in there and smell them a little bit more. When we're talking about aromatic varietals like Sauvignon Blanc, I also like to, shove your nose all the way in there and definitely get it. But some of those floral characteristics, if we're talking some, with Viognier, some honeysuckle, or even some like orange blossom in this one, some of the floral notes will come up above the rim, and if you just go straight in there, you're gonna miss some of those. So maybe go all the way in, but then pull back a little bit. You also maybe notice I'm smelling, at both sides of the rim, just to kind of get a total sense of the wine and the various flavors, because they're gonna hit on different spots of the glass for sure. So tell me what you're doing with this wine, because obviously it has great acidity. That's what we're talking about, that grapefruit that we have there. But it's not like sharp, right? So I think sometimes with wines that are acidic, they get that, when you bite into a lemon, you get that really sharp kind of, your jaw pinches a little bit. I don't get that. So it's like I get this beautiful flavor, and I can tell that there's acidity. It makes my mouth water, and I want to take another sip. But it has a really lovely mouthfeel, and it's like super creamy. So tell me what you're doing in the winemaking to make that happen.
Yeah, so a lot like the sparkling program, the yeast after fermentation has a lot of texture to it. So after I go through a very, very cool fermentation, and that allows keeping a lot of the thiol aromas, the very aromatic aromas inside of the wine. And then what I'm doing after the fermentation, I'm stirring the yeast inside of the tank. And just like the sparkling wine, when the yeast breaks down, it creates texture. The other way Sauvignon Blanc is typically balanced, because it is so acidic, is a lot of wineries will add back some sugar or some grape concentrate to sweeten the wine to make it feel balanced. But what I'm doing is I'm actually just using the yeast that was inside of the fermentation to create body and texture and layers, so that it's a more balanced wine, but it is completely bone dry.
Okay, great. So Kerry and Robert both were commenting about you know, basically the acidity and the mouthfeel. So I hope that answered your question for you. Kerry was asking if the Semillon maybe added a little bit of that plushness to the mouthfeel.
It definitely will, yes.
Okay, and then, so Robert's saying the 2016, he feels like the perception of acidity on the 2016 might have been a little bit higher. Do you think there was a vintage difference, or what do you account for the differences in that?
Spot on, actually.
Good, Robert, you're a great taster. Way to go.
Yeah, the 16 was a cooler vintage for us, and it was a longer ripening time for the Sauvignon Blanc, where last year we had such beautiful weather, and it was so sunny that we did get more tropical notes. So you will find more acidity in the 16 and a little bit more tropical aromas in the 17. And that's the fun part about being a winemaker. Every year is a little bit different. You have to adapt with what Mother Nature gives you.
Well, and you know, obviously we're making vintage wines, including the sparklings, which is unique to sparklings. Not, you know, most sparkling wines are non-vintage. So really being true to the vintage year to year, and like you said, that to me, that's the fun part.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And that to me is like the beauty of wine, right? Is, you know, every vintage is different, every year is different, thinking about what the weather and the temperature and the people who pick the grapes, and right, that's what really connects us to ultimately it being an agricultural product and being part of the land and the earth, right?
Yeah.
Which is what makes it so fun.
Yeah,
and so romantic and like that artistic way too, right?
For sure, and we're so attached to it because we are growing our grapes right here. So when I see these grapes, I can see those vines mature, the Sauvignon Blanc vines, year after year. I can see what they're producing, and it's amazing.
Kerry also had another comment about the ABV, so the alcohol level. So he's saying that he loves the alcohol level and the fact that there's no RS or residual sugar. So for those who are following along with the comments. So RS is just residual sugar. All of our wines are dry. Even our sparklings are all brut. So even brut sparklings have a little bit of residual. Ours are all on the low end of that. But then even ABV, I think, is a really interesting comment. You know, depending on where in the country or really where in the world you're drinking wines, the alcohol can range, you know, quite a bit. And it's all based on the growing season and how hot it is there. And there certainly are some regions that are, you know, super hot that are putting out wines that are, you know, 15.5, 16% alcohol. We're definitely more of, more old world in that style, I would say, where all of our wines, so the sparklings are at like the 12.5, all of our whites are going to be in that 13.5 range, and 13 and a half, and then the reds are going to be at 14.
Right, and I think that is kind of a sweet spot for me. What I like as far as being a food-friendly wine or just an enjoying wine, you can really enjoy a glass during a meal, and it doesn't overpower what you're eating, and it's just it's a great balance between the acidity and the alcohol that's left.
I totally agree. All right, you guys ready to move on to the rosé? All right, so I'm gonna do my trick again. And then for those who have joined us, definitely stay with us to the end. You know, we won't make this too long, but this is our first Facebook Live virtual tasting. We've done some other kind of virtual tastings before, but this first one on Facebook Live. So we might have some cool surprises coming at the end for those who stay on. And we've got some guests who are staying at Admiral State at the hotel. They're joining us here live, so maybe we'll get some live questions coming in a little bit. I'll put you on the spot. All right. So we're gonna move on to the rosé.
Okay. So rosé is another one of my favorites. This wine is actually a blend of a lot of different grapes, and I'm really doing a balancing act between the flavor profile that I want, that I enjoy in a rosé, and you know what those grapes are going to bring into the flavor components of this wine. So it is a blend of Merlot and Pinot Noir primarily. It's also got some Cabernet Franc and a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon. And really, I'm finding a balance in the vineyard. I'm bringing some grapes in, some Pinot Noir that I really like for nice acidity, some good citrus notes, and then I'm bringing in some Merlot and some Cabernet Franc to really run out more of the red fruit aromas. So you're going to get a lot more strawberry and a lot more black cherry, a little bit of blackberry as well, but it's really a balance between having a nice fresh wine that is also a dry rosé, so it is a bone dry wine, having a nice acidity with a nice lower alcohol, and it's just a really nice wine to enjoy, especially in the summer.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about kind of what you're talking about, where some of the grapes that you are picking are being picked for the acidity, right? So being picked a little bit earlier, being directly pressed or like little skin contact, right? And then blending with some bleed or Saignée.
Yeah, so for the red harvest for rosé, it's very easy. I've got some Pinot Noir blocks that I know that have a great flavor profile for this, so we're taking those directly to the grape press. We handpick everything, take it quickly over to the press very gently, get a nice juice with a very nice pale pink color. The Merlot and the Cabernet Franc and the Cabernet Sauvignon, what we're doing is we're actually harvesting a little bit more mature fruit. We're actually bringing them in, destemming the grapes, and we're putting all of those grapes inside of the tank. After macerating for a few hours, the grape skins have contact with the juice and creating a very aromatic rosé, but what it lacks is acidity, and it's actually a little bit higher alcohol. So if you make a rosé out of Saignée, which is just a French term for bleeding, so it's basically you're taking the grapes, putting them in the tank, and then bleeding the juice off the tank. It's a brilliant wine. It's just very unbalanced. It's got a lot of the strawberry notes that you're looking for, but the acidity is lacking, and for me it's all about balance. So we have to take those two. We ferment them separate, so I'm taking them in different tanks and I'm fermenting them. It's 100% stainless steel, so I'm making a nice, crisp, clean wine, fermented separately, and then I'm making the blend later on.
Okay, so I have a complete confession. I love rosé. I drink rosé year round if I can find it or find good ones. To me, this is a total go-to. I might be directly responsible for 3% increase of rosé consumption in the United States. It might be just at my house. But I have to say, this is what I love for a rosé. I think, and I drink a lot of them, like I said. So I think the rosés that I've had that are 100% Saignée, like you said, it's beautiful wine, totally fine, but they can be a little bit what I call flabby or a little bit flat, right? Where I'm looking for that really nice acidity. And then I think some of the rosés that are just directly pressed rosé or maybe harvested a little bit earlier to be rosé can lack. I like the sharpness, so I like the acidity in them, but I think mouthfeel is the biggest thing, right? Because you don't have lees stirring to help with that volume or any oak aging or any of that kind of stuff, right? So the mouthfeel just seems like a little bit
layered, textured.
Here, here.
Sure.
So what I'm saying is ones that are just directly pressed, a little bit lacking. They can be a little bit thin.
Yes.
So this is my total go-to where you get that beautiful acidity from the directly pressed wine, and then that kind of creamy and heavier mouthfeel from the bleed or the Saignée that you have. And then the fact that you're doing it separately, is in the cellar, you're controlling all of that. We're not just saying, okay, here's all the bleed, we're just going to take it and blend it in. We're doing tasting trials to find where is that exact balance. And, if we don't use some, we don't use them. The goal is just to make the best rosé that we can, not to use everything that we're bleeding off tanks, right? So I love this wine, if you couldn't tell. I love it. But, we basically make enough rosé, and I think most wineries do, where, it's the first thing we bottle, right? So we're bottling it in March usually. So we're bottling it in March, and then, we hope that it lasts through Thanksgiving kind of thing, which is, again, what most people are doing, and probably the right time to drink rosé, but I love it all the time.
And that's what's fun. Every year, it's kind of a fleeting wine. So every year, you make it, you enjoy it for the year, and then you're on to the next one.
So Kerry's commenting that he wants this rosé all day, and I do too, but I have a job, so I can't drink during the day, unfortunately. Or maybe I can, just don't tell anyone. So you guys ready to move on to the Meritage? Any questions? Oh, we have a question, yeah.
So can rosés age in a bottle like a Cabernet or?
Not really. There is. So the question is, can rosé age very well? The problem is that the aromatics aren't going to hold up over time, so you're going to lose a lot of those nice fruity aromas to it. And the wine doesn't have a lot of tannin, so it's not going to have a lot of length to age. So for me, the rosés are great. Enjoy them within 3 months of buying, and you're just going to love them. So.
But like a year or two.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
They can last a year.
Yes.
I just, I just like the fresh rosés. Yeah.
Right. So it's it's certainly gonna change over time. So not that it's gonna be bad or anything like that, but what is so beautiful about them is that freshness and that fruitiness that is right up front and prominent. And those are the two things that over time are gonna like settle into the wine. So it's gonna change. But yeah, I would say a year or two.
Yeah.
All right. Meritage?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so this is where I am going to switch to
A larger glass.
a larger glass. And a lot of people will say white wine glass and red wine glass. And again, as a general rule of thumb, and when you're at home and you have two sets and one is smaller and one is larger, that's a good, right, general rule. But with glasses these days, and it totally does make a difference, people, we would actually call this a Bordeaux glass, right? So we're saying it's a white red wine glass. That's what we'll call it today. But really a Bordeaux glass. So you could use it for white and red. But thinking of those Bordeaux varieties where they all have Burgundy glasses, but it's gotten to the point where, no joke, they're making like a different glass shape for specific varieties. And I don't know about you, but I've done these super cool blind tastings with the very different shaped glasses, and it really does make a difference. It's actually kind of staggering. So a beautiful glass, a crystal wine glass, is worth drinking out of. You'll definitely have a different perception of the flavors of the wine than just drinking out of a standard glass. So I'm an advocate for a really nice glass for sure. But even at home, I just have two. I have two sizes. And I do have flutes, believe it or not. So I have flutes, white wine, and red wine. What do you have at home?
I have flutes and Bordeaux glasses. Those are my favorites.
That's it?
Yeah, that's what I use
Oh
every
my
day.
gosh. Okay, there you go. All right, so we're on to the Meritage, 2016 Meritage. Take it away.
So this is our Meritage blend. So this is our Bordeaux style blend. We're using traditional Bordeaux grapes. On this wine, we're using Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and Malbec. And the cool part about having the estate vineyard here, we're using high elevation grapes for this wine. We're using high density plantation, so we're actually taking vineyards that are higher elevation and then more densely planted together, so that they're yielding fruit that's just higher quality, it just has a nice round texture to them. And what I'm doing is I'm blending those. I'm making individual wines in the wine cellar. I'll bring in different blocks of Merlot or Malbec or Cabernet Franc, and I'll vinify them separate, and then I'll age them in French oak, typically for about 9 to 10 months for this wine. So it really brings a lot of layers and textures to the wine, and it's just a really nice wine. It's our balance between acidity and aromatics, even on our reds, because they aren't very high in alcohol. They are hitting about 13.5% alcohol, so these are really nice food-friendly wines here. I really like this wine. This is my go-to for just every day. If you're making like a nice stew or something, this is terrific with that.
So we have a couple questions that have come in about the Meritage. One is that they love Washington and California Meritage, and they're super impressed with this being from Virginia, and all of the grapes from Virginia.
Yes, these are actually, if you
more,
look at,
more so.
you can look, actually on these bottles, we've actually gone to the point where we've labeled them estate bottled, because we want to showcase that we are growing. We're working very hard. We've got 227 acres of grapevines planted here. And we've dedicated this land to making some really great wines, and this is a nice representation of that.
So we're growing all of the grapes here on site. So everything is grown, then produced, bottled, everything. So we're doing all of that here. Another question I saw come through was that the wine seems young, and would it benefit from aging? Yes. It is a baby, right? So 2016, just picked obviously. So the vintage on the bottle, if you didn't know, that's the vintage, that's the year that the grapes are picked. So they were picked in 2016, which means this wine wasn't even bottled until, you know, what, 14 months after. So into 2018.
2017 bottled, yeah.
Yeah, 2017 bottled, and then we're kind of just into 2018. So definitely would benefit from aging. Why don't you tell what's going to happen to it when it ages? And
right. So this has only been in bottle for a year right now, and when you put a wine bottle in the cellar, you put it away for a while. Really what you do is you get a lot of layers and textures. The tannin is starting to soften. So when you taste this wine, you've got a nice acidity, you've got aromatics, you've got dark fruits, a lot of, I've got black cherry, some black currant that's in there, a little bit of mocha and that you're getting from some of the French oak barrels. And over time, those tannins are really going to layer and lengthen. And it's going to create a much softer profile for the wine. So this is just a very early release for this wine, but it's showing so well that I think it could be drunk now easily. Okay,
so if you're one of those people who has it at home now, or if you're like me and you're super impatient, right? There's some tricks. There's some tricks along the way. So some people have commented, you know, could we have decanted it, or would it have benefited from decanting? Absolutely. So if you have a decanter at home, it's something that you can do, and the wine is going to, it helps. So the whole aging process, right, and with wine and the fact that there's a cork, is there's just permeability with oxygen. So it's just how oxygen is interacting with that wine and how it ages. Certainly the slower that it happens, and if it's done with the right temperature and all of that, the chemistry, you know, is certainly your best result. But you can do things to help that along the way. And so, if, like I said, if you're impatient, or at any bottle, if you open up a bottle of red that you have at home and you just say, oh wow, this seems a little bit tight, or you know, seems the tannins are a little bit rough, decant it if you have a decanter. If you don't have a decanter, the best thing to do is just pour it into your glass and kind of walk away from it for a little while. So a trick that I like to do is I will taste whatever wine that I'm going to have with dinner before I start cooking. And if I'm happy with how it tastes, if I'm happy with the tannin structure of it, I'll just put the cork in it and put it back. If I'm not happy with the tannin structure, I want it to open up a little bit, I'll either decant it or I'll go ahead and pour out the glasses. By the time you're ready to sit for dinner, it's definitely going to have softened quite a bit. So that's the trick that I use. Is there anything that you do at home?
Well, I mean, the pairing could be a big choice for that.
Go. That's
so
true.
One of the things that, because this is, you can feel the tannins, they are there, they're present. You could balance this something with a little bit like a steak or a ribeye, something like that. That's got a little bit of fat into it, and that will soften the tannins. Or something like a nice cheese would soften some of those tannins, but because of the acidity in the tannins, it's going to make a nice flavor profile.
You're exactly right. So right, there's a complete difference between just tasting a wine like at a tasting bar or kind of in this environment versus pairing it with food, and how, whether it's fattiness or sweetness or acidity in the food is going to change the wine too. So that makes a huge difference for sure. Something to think about. And I think honestly, as you become a better taster, as you drink more wine, as you're pairing more wine with food, that's something that you'll learn to do over time. You'll learn to be able to taste something in a tasting environment and say, okay, I know that if I age this for a few years, or if I have it with blank, like it's gonna change it in the way that I'm looking for. The other thing to do is don't hesitate reaching out to whatever winery you purchase the wine. A lot of times, so what we do is we call it our wine library, where we'll keep, you know, a decent amount of wine back so that we can taste along the way and provide kind of updated tasting notes or recommended aging notes for people who might have wine in their cellar. So reach out to wherever you purchase the wine. They'll help you with that too. Sometimes for our wine library, we'll do a cool release for wine club members or something. So we'll do some fun stuff like that.
Yeah, I when I buy bottles at different wineries, I go to wineries too, and I enjoy other producers. I don't like to buy just one single. I usually buy 2 or maybe 3.
Three is my limit. I mean, my minimum, excuse me.
3 is the sweet spot, because you can open one and enjoy it just like you were tasting it in the tasting room, or you know, the minute you open that, you remembered what it was. And then you can open one up, maybe a year or two later and see how it's evolved. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it an open now, or is it, this is tasting so awesome that I'm together.
So we have a couple comments about, so hopefully we've answered them about, how the suggestions on cellaring them and aging them. We have what we call, the technical notes where we get into the nitty gritty of, the pH and TA and residual sugar and all of that, and we'll have a recommended aging on that. So just shoot us an email or post a comment and we can direct you to where you can find that information on our website, or we can email you a PDF with that information. So certainly if you've got anything in your cellar, we're happy to provide some tasting notes or cellar recommendations for you along the way. Did I miss some questions, Jacqueline?
Robert's asking about a tour and taste in the cellar.
Oh, well, so tour and tasting of the cellar. So this is something we do, but we do it pretty infrequently. This year we actually have a great tour, and we did it last year too, got rave reviews. It is coming up on August 5th, and we're pretty big. We're actually, kind of like we mentioned earlier, we really are a farm and a grower and a winery, and so it's a busy place in terms of operations, doing all of the fermentation and aging and bottling here. So it's hard to coordinate doing it all of the time. So we've got one coming up August 5th that benefits St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Tickets are available online. Last year was our first year doing it. It did sell out, so I recommend getting your tickets early. I can say that for the past 3 years running now that Harvest has started August 5th?
Yeah.
I won't make any predictions, but for the past several years, Harvest has started that time. So what we do for that tour is whatever's going on in the cellar that day at that time. So they're in there, they're working. You might see them working on the sorting set of barrels. Again, depending on what's going on, you might taste juice that is not even fermenting yet. It's quite literally just
getting pressed.
Yeah, getting like literally tasting juice right off the press. You could potentially be tasting partially fermented juice, finished wines. Depends. Run of everything, right? And then on whatever's in the barrel. So we'll taste. It's a cool opportunity. We'll taste some of the reds that, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, all of the reds. We make another Bordeaux blend, our New World Reserve, but with all of them, they're all vinified and aged separately. And so the blend happens, when we do our tasting trials and right before bottling. So you might have an opportunity to taste those wines separately. It's super fun. And all benefit St. Jude. And Patrick, who I have to give a shout out, who's our sponsor for that? Our Albemarle Limousine in Charlottesville does an amazing job. So they're a great limo and car service operator, and they are donating their time and their vehicle to do this tour. So we're super thankful to them for doing it as well. So all of the money, 100% of the proceeds go to St. Jude. All right, another question we have. So we'll go back a little bit on the, back to the sparkling. So tell us about picking grapes differently for sparkling versus picking them for still. Like you mentioned, the Blanc de Blanc is 100% Chardonnay.
Yep.
We make a Chardonnay,
yes,
but
we
it's
do.
still Chardonnay.
Yes.
So what's the difference?
So the biggest thing between sparkling wine and still wine is the timing of harvest. So what I'm looking for in a sparkling wine base is actually the complete opposite of what you're thinking would make a great wine for a still wine. So you're harvesting a little bit earlier, usually about 2 weeks. If we're doing a still Chardonnay, it's usually 2 to 3 weeks later as a pick date compared to the sparkling wine. What I'm looking for in sparkling wine is a nice acidity with a lower alcohol and the nice citrus aromas that are accompanied with that. If I'm looking for a still Chardonnay, we're going to let the sun do what it does. It's going to allow the grapes to dehydrate, ripen up, create a little bit more ripe aromas, more on the more apple characteristics, not green apple, but more ripe apples and pears, poached pears, things like that. They're going to go. The only thing that's going to do that is natural sun. So The biggest thing is pick date, and that influences the earlier your harvest, the lower your alcohol and the higher your acidity. The later your harvest, the higher the alcohol and the lower the acidity. So it's really a balance between the flavors you want and the balance that you want inside of that wine.
So we have another question about temperature, what temperature you should serve wine. So as I mentioned earlier, I really like to drink sparkling wine pretty cold. So, you know, most of the time so every varietal, by the way, if you look online, every variety is going to say, you know, it's going to give you a couple degree temperature range, and they're all over the place, and they get very specific, like 43 degrees, you know. So at home, I always say that's not necessarily super practical.
Right. And
just a couple, again, tips and tricks to keep in mind. First of all, your fridge is really cold. So your fridge is like 34, 35 degrees, right? That's super cold. So to me, that is the temperature that I like to drink sparkling. So if I have sparkling wine, I have it in my fridge, and I'm going to drink it straight out of my fridge. For white wine and rosé, I'll put rosé in that category, and then red wine, this is a gross generalization, but it's just like my little tip for at home. I like the white wines that I have in the fridge, so again, they're in the fridge at 35 degrees, take them out of the fridge for 10 minutes before serving them. So that's going to bring that temperature up to maybe that 40, 41, 42 degree, which is where I like to drink them. You know, some of your oakier Chardonnays, a little bit warmer even, is a little bit nicer, up to 45 degrees, I would say. But again, think back to that, 10-minute rule, I call it. For your red wine, if when people talk about cellar temperature, what they mean is like 100 feet down in a cellar in France, right? I mean, it's cold in there. So 55 degrees. Nobody's cellar is 55 degrees here, and nobody's house is that cold. So your cellar might be 65, maybe. And certainly if you're keeping it in your dining room, or hopefully not in your kitchen, it's the hottest room in your house, don't keep it there. But in your house, right, it's probably 68, 70 degrees. So even for red wine, 10 minutes, put it in the fridge. So you're going to take a red wine that, maybe is at 70 degrees, 68 degrees, put it in the fridge for 10 minutes. It's going to bring that temperature down to about that 58, 59, 60 degree range, which is kind of your ideal, right? Do you agree?
Yeah, I would totally agree. And, it's easier to go a little bit warmer than trying to cool things afterwards. Right. So you could always take your hand and just warm it just a little bit until you've got the nice balance of the temperature that you really are getting the aromatics of the wine.
But kind of even back to the comment about tannin earlier about the Meritage, and I totally agree, right? This is a young wine and it could definitely benefit from aging, but temperature is a big part of that. If you're drinking this Meritage at room temperature, so at that like 68, 70 degrees, the tannins are going to be more pronounced than if you're drinking it at a proper cellar temperature. So that's part of it and definitely affects it too. Anything else? More questions? Comments?
How would you rate the Virginia wines right now compared to, say, a Napa Valley or a Bordeaux?
I'll just repeat the question so the question is, how do we rate Virginia wines versus like a Napa Valley or a Bordeaux?
I mean, not speaking for our wines, I think we're making world-class wines here. But just in general, the Virginia wine industry has really exploded on the scene, and we've shown that time after time, year after year, that we are able to compete in blind tastings with West Coast competitions, Eastern, in European competitions, Eastern U.S. We are competing with the best of the best, and in blind tastings, we stand out.
I think honestly, there are great wines being made everywhere, and Virginia is no exception to that. And I think the great thing about the wine industry is those who are doing it the way we are, right? So estate grown and sort of with thought and care in our product, and that, it's something that is really crafted, if you will, so not kind of mass produced product. No matter where you are in the world, they're trying to make the best wine that they can, right? People who are in this industry are dedicated, obsessed, maybe borderline crazy, right? So, there is a desire and a strive to always do better and achieve. So I think there are great wines being made everywhere around the world. And kind of to Jonathan's comment, you know, our 2016 Sauvignon Blanc, which we've now moved to our wine library, just as an example, the largest international wine competition in the world happens to be in San Francisco, but it is the largest international wine competition in the world. 12 Sauvignon Blancs were awarded a double gold. 10 were from New Zealand, 1 was from California, and the other was our 2016 Sauvignon Blanc. So what does that say? You know, Jonathan was just in France in December and doing tastings with winemakers in Champagne with some of our sparklings. And right, you said that all of them were like, there's no way this is from Virginia.
Right. In blind tastings.
In blind tastings.
Yeah.
So in blind tastings, they thought they were champagnes. And so it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
One more question on there.
Yeah, we can ask a couple more. Favorite wine you've made and what makes it your favorite? Oh, Jonathan.
Oh no.
Yeah. That's like asking who's your favorite kid, right? Like
It really is. It really is.
like you have a favorite, but
yeah.
you can't really say that because
Yeah.
it's not nice to the other ones, right?
It really is. I'm always a fan of sparkling wine's dear to my heart. So I mean, I've got to say one of my reserve sparklings, probably an 08 sparkling reserve. It's one of our oldest blocks of Chardonnay. Really nice aging potential on it. Just really nice balance. It's probably one of my favorites.
So we are wrapping up, you know, it's just past 8:45. We said this is how long it would take, so we don't want to keep any of you guys. I know some of you have parties that you're hosting right now while you're tasting. So just for fun, what I wanted to do for our first Facebook Live virtual tasting is we're going to do all online orders tonight. If you use the promo code VIRTUAL, you got to type it in virtual, all caps, as you check out, but you'll get 20% off any online order. And kind of cool, you get discounts at 6 and 12 bottles also, so that 20% will stack on top of that, so you'll even get better discounts. So you have until midnight tonight to use the promo code VIRTUAL, all caps. And we'll post that in the comments as well. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have more questions, feel free to continue to post them. We'll get them answered for you. And otherwise, have a great night. Enjoy the parties that you've put together and enjoy now you have 4 open bottles of wine. Have fun. Enjoy.
Cheers.
Bye.